You guys are doing a great thing. It's such an uncomfortable topic to talk about, especially for a guy, young guys in their early 20s. And, I'm glad that, I could tune in and, listen to you guys.
Spencer Kobren's The Bald Truth.
Hey guys, welcome to the broadcast. Thank you so much for hanging out while we got up and going here. Joe looks like he has the overhead lights on. So he just ran into the studio.
Try to get my other lights going. I don't know what's going on.
Guys, welcome to the broadcast. This is the Hair Loss Show, The Bald Truth. If you are new to the broadcast, don't know who I am or who he is or why we're here, I'm the founder of the American Hair Loss Association, author of The Bald Truth and The Truth About Women's Hair Loss, 2 books that were published more than 2 decades ago. Insane, actually. And I've been doing this broadcast in one iteration or another for the past 27 years approximately, since 1998. This is the only program, the only broadcast, the only stream, the only online resource, and this is going to sound effed up. Well, there may be 1 more or 2 more now, but not like this, where we're taking calls. That really helps you to guide you guys and ladies safely, to navigate you through this insane cesspool of a hair loss industry and the world of hair transplant surgery. I don't care what you think. I don't care what you think you know. I don't care what you read on Reddit or all the other happy horse shit you see out there. In general, you guys don't know shit about what's happening in this field. And in most cases, even if you've been through surgery, you don't know shit about what's actually happened to you. It's sad to say. I see these young guys who are having hair transplant surgery. They think they know it all. And they go in and they have whatever, even if it's 3,500 or 4,000 grafts, and they think they found the perfect surgeon because they did their Reddit research. But what no one's telling them is, yeah, all right, maybe it looks good now. If you're lucky. Sadly, in most cases, it doesn't anymore. It's very difficult to find someone who, at least even coming out of the gates for your first hair transplant, where it's going to look 100% natural or reasonable. That's tough enough. But these guys that are running off to Brazil and other parts of the world, and we always mention Turkey all the time, to get 5,000, 6,000 grafts placed, moved, and implanted at the age of 24, 25, 27, you fucked yourselves up. People don't want to hear that. I was sent something from one of these platforms where some kid who had FUE heard the program and said that Spencer Kobren thinks that all FUE will eventually fail, or some shit like that. No, that's not what I think, and that's not what I say. And I find that fascinating for several reasons. But let me give you this person's response who runs this platform. Their response was to essentially break down the IAHRS by percentage of physicians who are members here in the United States compared to those who are European, Turkish, what have you. And the claims made were that most of the doctors in the U.S. are still performing outdated strip surgery. And that is why I have this prejudice about FUE surgery, which is insane, by the way. Because as some of you know or may not know, I introduced, and as our friend John Cole will say, I single-handedly introduced and pushed the envelope, but introduced FUE surgery to physicians in the U.S. and in Europe when no one wanted to do it, before it was termed FUE. I was the biggest proponent and believer of this adjunct procedure. Let me repeat that. Adjunct, tough word for me, procedure. Now, it could be a standalone procedure for the right patient, for sure. But especially at the beginning of this process, when people were still trying to figure it out because information was not being shared, and it's still not. We have a whole new crew of Ray Woods mentality guys who are unwilling to share their trade secrets.
Secret sauce.
With their colleagues, who hide their instrumentation. It's fucking insane. This is medicine, people. But anyway, so this guy breaks down how much I make or how much he thinks I make. And, you know, I'm trying to save the organization because everyone's doing FUT. I wish that were the case. Almost everyone has converted their practices to FUE. There's a handful of American surgeons and a handful of European surgeons who are still performing FUT on a regular basis, who are part of the IHRS. They've all converted the infrastructure and their practices to FUE because that is where the demand is. This is an industry generally where science, data, reality doesn't always come into the equation when patient demand demands something else. And patient demand is scarless, no linear scar or cutting, hair transplant surgery. That is where patient demand is. Mm-hmm. With that said, there are a percentage of guys, younger guys too, where the pendulum's starting to swing back a little bit. And they're realizing, you know what, after a decade of pushing this on everybody, we're seeing a lot of guys coming back who look a little fucked up after 5 or 7 years.
Just a little.
Yeah. Who may have benefited because of their genetics, family history, because of the limitations of donor and the reality of donor dominance, may have benefited from, you know, maybe one decent-sized strip of more DHT-resistant hairs. Now that's being written about. Now that's being talked about. But when I talk about it and I try to guide people in the right direction, in an honest direction, it's only because I want to save my financial ass.
It doesn't even make sense because almost every clinic out there does FUE.
I have to beg these clinics. I'm like, please do not completely remove your FUT infrastructure. Your techs need to know how to do this. Hassan Wong, biggest strip guys, you know, they held on to strip with, you know, you had to pry it away from their cold, dead hands.
Yeah.
And now
they're the last big holdouts.
And now the reality is they're doing probably, I'd say at this point, more FUE than strip.
Yeah, they are. Absolutely.
There's only one guy in San Diego, I think, that's still really doing mostly strip.
Yeah.
And that's it.
And charging a premium as well.
Yeah, well, there's a guy in Los Angeles too charging a premium for mostly strip. But yeah. So I think this is just, you know, food for thought for you guys out there. You can't believe shit that you read from third-party people who know nothing. Want to be cult leaders in this fucked up space where all of you guys are vulnerable, all of you guys are suffering, and all of you guys are, are hoping against hope. And that is the topic of this broadcast today. Is there hope when it comes to hair loss and hair transplant surgery? And I can tell you this, there's very little hope when it comes to getting accurate, honest, real, insightful, credible, legitimate information. When you're on message forums, when you're on Instagram, when you're on Reddit, it barely exists. Sometimes there's little pieces that you could find, little tidbits of reality. In most cases, you guys are being bullshitted by maybe people who've been burned in the past and they somehow think they have more information than people who are actually in the trenches who are willing to tell you the truth. But they are sending you people, it's like sheep to the slaughter.
It's interesting because you have people that they may even have good intentions with some of the information they're putting out, but they don't realize that their information is so laced with a poisonous spite because of their own negative outcomes, where they've had a bad surgery, and then they start doing the research after the fact, which is so common. It's so common for people to start doing their research after they've had a hair transplant and haven't reached their full result yet. I can't count how many times I've had people calling up saying or emailing whatever. Had a surgery last week and I just found you. I wish I'd found you before, or I just started doing my research. I wish I'd done it before, that kind of thing. And some of these people, like when they have a terrible outcome, or even something that's not terrible, they just self-perceive it as terrible. They become very ugly as people. They become very spiteful. And their goal is to help others find the right answers, but their own information is so biased with this poisonous result of their own bad outcome, they can't see the forest for the trees. There's no fairness in the information they present, and they don't understand the imbalance that they're creating. I see this all the time. Reddit is notorious for this.
But besides not creating balance, they actually are willing to essentially post hearsay, misinformation. I mean, they don't know shit about the industry. They think that they do.
I actually had one guy tell me straight up that he doesn't care about patients that have gone through surgery as long as he can get the information out of them to help others. Like,
I don't know what that means.
Not giving a shit about patients that are sharing their experiences. Just using them for his own goals.
Well, like I said, there are guys out there that have very little power in life. They find these platforms and they're able to cultivate them, these third-party platforms they don't even own. And it becomes almost like they're cult leaders. They get a hard-on from all this shit. Now, I don't care about that. Listen, you do whatever you got to do in life to find some sort of purpose, I guess. But I think consumers, hair transplant patients, young guys who are interested in somehow fixing their hair loss or getting out of this situation, all of you have to understand there's no escape. As soon as you cross that line into the world of hair loss, you're in this forever. It all comes down to a few things: the ability or the possibility of managing your hair loss, the use of medications, really educating yourself about all these processes, including hair transplant surgery. If you decide to go the surgical route, understanding how to manage that for the long term. That means not shooting your load. That means not taking third-party advice from anonymous people. But you also all have to be prepared for the possibility that you cannot be helped.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you see some guy online who has similar hair as yours or similar hair loss pattern now as you do. Things can change completely in 2 years. You have to be prepared for all of that. We had a guy in the program, I think last week they called in, said he went for a consultation 2 years ago with the doctor, and he was at a certain point where the doctor was able to give him, at the time, accurate guidance and an assessment of how many grafts he would need. And I guess Finasteride is now working for him. I forgot the story, but he had another consultation with the same doctor, and now the story has changed. And it's not because the doctor's opinion changed. It's because this guy's hair loss progressed in a way where if he had surgery 2 years prior, he may not be happy right now. That's a possibility that you guys have to understand. I had another guy who wrote me on the Jake Paul post that I made on Instagram and said something to the effect of, you know, this page is so negative. If there's a will, there's a way.
We can will it into existence, our hair.
Your video froze, brother.
Ah, great. Good stuff.
If there's a will, there's a way. Like, yeah, I mean, if that were the reality, who would be walking around, you know, with thinning hair? And then you have the guys who are out there that, I saw this one comment that was sent to me with this other thread, where essentially this young guy says, why would you listen to these two guys? Take a look at them. They don't know anything about what looks good.
They're old.
They didn't even say old. Just we don't know what looks good because apparently our hair doesn't look good. Whatever. Now, this 20-something-year-old kid, or he could be a teenager, if he can fast forward to what he's going to look like at 59 years old or however old you are, 55, 54.
54.
Yeah.
Don't push it. Not yet.
Do you understand? I mean, I don't think these kids understand the metamorphosis in general, and usually not in a good way, of what you look like when you're 25 compared to what you look like when you're almost 60. And if I could be honest with you, and not to sound obnoxious, if these kids could look the way that we look, hair-wise, and in my case otherwise, I'm just kidding, Joe. At our age,
Yeah,
they couldn't even fathom it. It's almost unimaginable,
it is. Yeah.
especially when you start to lose your hair at a young age. Our cases, specs, guys like that, they don't exist in general, especially the guys that started too young.
Yeah, 100%.
Guys, the phone number is 888-659-3727. We just had a call on the line. Call back. I will take your calls. This is a call-in show. And that's what it's all about. That's why we come here and we do this thing live. And that's why I take the time out of my day, on a Friday, by the way, where I could just go away. It's summertime. I did that last week. But just go away. Go out to the desert, sit by the pool, fucking relax. But I choose to do this for you guys, with Joe, of course. By the way, your show last week, Joe, was really good.
Thank you. It was fun. That's some good calls.
You pulled it off. Now, I like both those docs. Obviously, Sever is an associate member of the IHRS. I think he does, the clinic does really good work. But here's something I notice, and I think it's interesting. I know that he's a very vocal guy behind the scenes. But there's a certain level of diplomacy, and everyone needs to be diplomatic. But there's a certain level of diplomacy when physicians get on camera. that, in my view, isn't always in the best interest of the patient. And I think that, and there's a couple of examples where I think there should have been kind of a hard and fast stance as opposed to, well, there's certain reasons why, everyone gives different graft assessments and shit like that. That's not true. That's just being diplomatic. The person that called you last week that said that one clinic said 6,000 grafts and other clinics were saying 2,000 to 3,000 grafts, it should have been put out there that whoever told you could get 6,000 grafts on your first shot is a clinic to avoid. That's it.
He said 6,000 grafts? I don't remember the call.
Yeah, 6,000 grafts. Maybe it was 5,000. I'm pretty sure it was 6,000.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's not a. I'm not. It's not a heavy critique against the doctors, but I just wish. Listen, these guys know what's going on. They know the truth. Just say it. Just tell people the truth when you're behind the mic, when you're on camera. I just wish more doctors really had the guts to do that. That's all I'm saying. Let's take a call, Joe.
That's fine.
You seem very busy.
Let's do it.
Let's see who this is. Hey, you're on the air. Who's this and where are you calling from?
Hey, how's it going, guys? This is Max from Los Angeles.
Max from Los Angeles. What's happening,
Max.
man?
Hey, I called in a couple of weeks ago. I was the caller talking about the chest pain that I was experiencing from Finasteride.
Yeah. So what's going on?
Okay.
Well, I'm happy to report that it is no longer present.
Okay.
I
good.
took 2 weeks off and then came back onto it at an extremely small dose at a fourth of a milligram, was that 0.25? And I think interestingly enough, after bumping it up to half a pill is when it started to completely go away. And I've been taking half a pill 3 times a week, working back up to full milligram 3 times a week. But the chest sensation is completely gone. I went to my doctor, and my doctor suggested that it could be not necessarily my doctor was really confused why it would be something like gyno if I had been on it for 5 years, which was just very unlikely. So my doctor thought it could be this condition where you get inflamed, the muscles become inflamed in between the ribs of the chest. What is it called? Costochondritis, something like that. From forward too forward of posture.
All right.
But it wasn't sort of the touch, so I'm not really sure if that's what it was. Regardless, the pain and the sensation is gone now.
Well, that's great.
That's what matters. I'm pretty stoked. Every time I would feel that sensation, it would just kind of send my mind in a spiral of what that implies. And having to get off the medication, which I really didn't want to do.
Well, listen, it sucks. Obviously you don't want to get off the medication, and you don't want. I think I called you bitch tit Mike last week, right? Or when you called?
I think it was Larry.
Larry, that's right. Larry, that's your name. But yeah, I mean, nobody wants that. But I'm glad that you were able to titrate. It was good. Listen, you decided to get off of it for 2 weeks, so your DHT levels really didn't change that much. It takes about 2 weeks to get back up to baseline anyway.
Yeah.
So you probably didn't lose any ground. And now that you've titrated and you're able to take, you said, what, 0.5 milligram a day now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, that's great. I mean, I think it's an important message for people to understand that in most cases, these adverse events, these side effects are transient.
Yeah.
See, and I think this is a great example of how there is hope for some people.
Yes.
Like the title of the show, Is There Hope? Yes, there is hope. In the case of the caller, no, seriously, it's like you find a way to deal with the issues that you're presented with It wasn't fun, but you pushed through. You found a balance to make this work for you, and I'm really happy to hear about this because so many people just give up for one reason or another. And I'm not saying it's not justified, but I think that if you really want to find a balance for this, then you have to work at it. So congratulations. I'm happy for you. That's awesome.
Thanks. Yeah, and
there is hope.
I guess when people think of transient side effects, they maybe think of it more exclusively in the early days of the medication. But I guess even more longer term, years and years in, you can still have a side effect present itself, but also have it be transient, which I guess a lot of people think like, oh, if it's this far in and I get something, then I'm just done for. But
well, listen,
go ahead. I've made the observation, through my years of dealing with prescriptions daily, multiple times daily with patients. Some people may think this is kind of controversial, but I don't think that side effects manifest after years. They either manifest in the first few months after taking the medication, or anything else in general, say 5 years later, is coincidental. I personally don't. I just don't see it. I could be wrong. Like I'm not saying this is the law, but it doesn't make sense to me that a side effect such as, say, impotence from Propecia use or Finasteride use would suddenly decide to rear its ugly head 5 years after you start taking it on a regular basis. There's something else going on.
Yeah.
Or
causation,
feeling of lethargy. Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. A lot of guys start blaming the medication, and they forget the fact that they just turned 50, and they're fat slobs, and eat pizza all the time, and kind of like me, and and they don't attribute their lifestyle and their age to the issue that they're blaming on the medication. It's easy to blame the medication for a lot of things, and a lot of people do, but that's just the way I look at it. I don't look at transient issues from Finasteride manifesting after 5 years being legitimate for most cases. There might be some cases where it is legitimate, but for the most part, I don't think it is. I just want to get that out there.
Yeah. I mean, the what is it? The correlation doesn't mean causation, or whatever that saying is.
Yeah, well said.
And
yeah, exactly.
Interestingly enough, there was another dosage adjustment so I recently switched, or I guess I should say added, oral minoxidil. I've been using the foam for about 2 years with some pretty good success, and I was having some irritation on the skin, and the adherence was fine. I never have skipped a day, and I just wanted to try out the oral medication, see how my body took it. And interestingly enough, the smaller the dose, I cut a 2.5 milligram pill into fourths and took a fourth, and that tiny little piece of pill gave me a worse reaction than cutting it in half. When I cut it in half, and I was like, I'm just going to try 1.25, and I felt absolutely nothing. But when I do a tinier piece, my heart is racing. It's hard to get to sleep. My throat feels weird, like all this weird headaches. And then if I up the dose, I actually don't feel any of those, and I feel completely balanced. I feel normal. It was really interesting.
That is interesting. Huh. And how long were you taking the half tablet versus the quarter tablet?
Well, I tried. I hadn't really tested it for any extended period of time, and I'm sure there's a chance that this is also, a side effect that could have been transient. But it was so uncomfortable that I was like, I'm already doing the foam. I'll just stick with the foam and screw this tiny little, fourth of pill. And then I came back to it, and I was like, well, let me just try the half, which is like half of the already recommended dose that my doctor gave me. And it didn't feel any of those effects. And I've been doing that for the last 5 or 6 days, and it's been feeling pretty normal. Did feel a little lightheaded in the gym today, but nothing alarming. I'm not sure if that is also something that your body adjusts to, or if it's just like, here's the slight blood pressure drop, and now anything you feel is always going to be that sensitive, or if your body kind of adjusts and it's like it doesn't allow to be that lightheaded over time or something. I'm not sure.
I've heard. I mean, just based on discussions I've had with people that have taken oral minoxidil. And before I get to that, everyone watching this, don't forget to hit the like button, please. Let's get the algorithm noticing the broadcast for today. We only got 8 likes. Let's get that up if we can. I've, in talking to people that have had some side effects of maybe lightheadedness, what have you, it does seem to go away, or it does seem to balance out over the course of the first several days if they push through, if they're not changing anything to try and compensate for it. So your experience is interesting. Lower dosage having that issue, and then doubling it back up to half a tablet, the issue's completely disappearing. That's a new one. It's encouraging, but it's a new one. I don't think I've heard that one before.
Yeah, I'm a strange case, I guess, but yeah, I'm
Nothing
excited
wrong with
that it's fun. Yeah, excited that it's working for me.
Yeah, well, good for you.
And yeah, so I know that right now I'm not a candidate for any type of surgery, but I like to be as well researched about it for future inevitability potentially.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a couple questions about if and when I do go down that route. I definitely think I would want to do an FUT, and I had a couple like very specific questions about it. One is if you've reached a certain point in your loss, or in a certain age as well, and it feels stabilized, but it's not a super significant amount of loss, are there like small FUTs that people do in terms of like the length of the cut, or the narrowness of the cut, or how does that vary? Because I don't know if that's really ever discussed.
Actually, that's a good question. It's not discussed much, at least on the show, and patients don't tend to ask that question. I've had that question when I was in clinic before, but it's rare. But the number of grafts determines the length of the strip and the width of the strip and how it's taken. So absolutely, I mean, FUT is not an exact science when it comes to getting the number of grafts that you're shooting for. Like, we're going for 2,500 grafts. You might wind up with 2,300 grafts and have to go in and get some more. You might wind up with 2,750. I've seen cases even more were taken out by mistake. Like we weren't meaning to go for that much, but we got it, so let's use it. But it absolutely does determined or is determined by the number of grafts that we're going for. So if a 500 graft, I mean, most people will be like, well, that's insane. Why do that when you can just do FUE? Well, a 500 graft strip would be, assuming everything heals properly and as expected, that would be an almost invisible strip scar because it's such a small procedure. It would be short and narrow, which means a lot less trauma to the scalp and a lot better healing as compared to, say, a 5,000 graft strip, which is maybe 30 centimeters long and 1.5 centimeters wide. That's significantly larger. So absolutely, the size of the strip is determined by the number of grafts that you're going for, and vice versa. The number of grafts are determined by the size of the strip.
Okay, I always thought it was just like this, like sort of standard length, and then I felt like it was more exclusively for a greater amount of loss because you just kind of had to take out that larger amount of hair. But I guess that makes sense. The smaller incision. I haven't really seen much about it. And as you guys were talking about,
most people will argue for FUE for a small procedure.
Yeah.
But there's nothing wrong with a small strip. There really isn't. In the hands of a good hands of a good surgeon, there's nothing wrong with that.
And how much of a game changer would you say that a how do you say it? Trifophytic?
Trichophytic closure.
How much of a, like, there's so few people talking about that I've seen in my research, and of the good ones, it is like damn near invisible. Like, is that not standard practice for a lot of the few FUT surgeons that are still doing that?
No, it is not. And it's also dependent on the case.
I see.
Trichophytic, yeah. I mean, some doctors will talk about trichophytic as being a standard. I don't think that's a good idea because, if there's that one patient where it doesn't make sense, then you just pissed off a patient when they find out after the fact. I didn't get trichophytic, but you said I'd get, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it also takes a certain level of skill and practice that a lot of the guys that are doing strip on a regular basis, they never really took to it. You have to be able to bevel that skin and have enough skin tissue to bevel that skin perfectly in order to create a closure with the right amount of tension so that beveled or thinner skin doesn't stretch back. And, a lot of the people, once it started to come out, I know that it was Paul Rose that created it. He called it the ledge procedure. Everyone tries to put a chokehold on these things. But, this is trichophytic closures have been used in plastic surgery for a very long time. And there's not a tremendous amount of evidence that hair grows through that skin consistently. So I think a lot of doctors will choose to make sure they have a secure closure that doesn't affect the integrity of your scalp and lessens the risk of stretch back than someone who goes for a trichophytic closure. It's really, in my view, kind of a marketing thing. I don't know if Joe agrees with that.
It is a marketing thing. Absolutely, 100%. But there is merit to its use. But to go back to the original question about it being standard, there's also the argument, and I actually believe in this, that it shouldn't be used until you're at your final FUT. Because if you come in and you have extensive loss, and you go for trichophytic closure over the course of, say, 3 strip surgeries before you decide to switch over to FUE, if that's your strategy. Every time you do a trichophytic closure, it's just a bit of extra tissue that's taken off that otherwise wouldn't be taken off, thereby creating the potential for slightly more tension. And every time you go back in for a subsequent strip, if that previous trichophytic turned out beautifully, the second trichophytic may not. They don't. It's not a textbook outcome every time, and that's why it's kind of unpredictable. Not to mention, there's two different kinds of trichophytic closure, where the bevel is taken on the upper edge, and then the other ones where the bevel is taken on the lower edge, and they create different outcomes, because when the hair is growing through that donor scar that forms, which is the whole goal of this. It doesn't grow at the same angle and direction as the hair above and below it. So it can create a step or a bulge in the way that your hair looks on the side and back of your scalp. So if you're used to your hair kind of growing, like it's nice and flat as far as it being close up against the sides and back of your scalp, you might wind up having this bulge that goes along the strip line because the hair coming out of that strip scar is perpendicular to the plane of the scalp. It's not hugging it at a shallow plane. It's actually at a right angle. A lot of people don't realize this. Even some doctors don't even think. They just say, oh, yeah, you comb through it. Look, hair's growing through it. You can't notice it. And they let the hair flop down, and it's kind of you can't see me right now, but it's like wings sticking out.
The more you know.
The more you know.
And that is reality. First of all, and I agree with what Joe said. It's not pure marketing, and there is merit to the procedure. And I don't disagree with him when he says that it maybe wait to your last procedure. But if you're having 3 strips and you're creating even more possible tension, just by removing that bevel, just by removing that slight bit of extra tissue, that could be, kind of the straw that broke the camel's back as far as having an unsightly scar.
Yeah, that 3 times is, could amount to like a quarter inch or half inch.
But even that once at the end of maybe more aggressive strips could weaken that area to a certain degree where you might get a little bit more stretch back in certain parts of the strip where that may not have occurred before. So whatever benefits you're getting from hair possibly growing through the skin could essentially be, really not worth it if you're going to have one area of the scar that's stretched out by 2 centimeters. That's a possibility. So I mean, it really is something you have to discuss with your physician, and you don't want to be in a position where you are telling a physician what he needs to do surgically to you. You guys just have to come to an agreement of what he's comfortable with or she's comfortable with and what you're comfortable with and what they're used to doing. Now, if someone is used to providing really aesthetically pleasing, trichophytic closures on a regular basis and has a tremendous amount of experience and understands the limitations and maybe your particular physiology compared to somebody else's on how that may work for you, then great. You got to go with what the doctor thinks. But it's good to have all this information. A lot of guys, what happens is they go online and all of a sudden they're giving their doctor's orders. I want 50 grafts per square centimeter. What size punches you're using. You need to use this size punch on me. Everybody's different. This is the practice of medicine. And also every person's physiology is different. Someone may promote the fact that they're using a 0.7 millimeter, interior punch, but you don't have the physiology to handle that. They're going to tear your grafts apart. Yeah. They're going to need to use larger punches on your particular case. And you're going to wonder why, wait a second, why aren't my punctate wounds, or why are my wounds so visible, or why am I, have slightly raised or even slightly keloided scars when I see all these great images on this doctor's website? People don't fully get that. I'm not scolding you, by the way.
No. I understand. One last thing is, so I have a scar on on the top of my head from when I was a child, and it's kind of funny to almost use it as obviously it wasn't surgically excised tissue or anything, but it's kind of an indicator of how, early preview of how I am potentially as a healer on my scalp, which is, I guess, kind of promising. It's a pretty clean scar, actually, with a few hairs growing through it. Funny enough.
Well, that's good, but also you remember you were a child when it happened. How old are you now?
30.
Okay. So, the healing process is going to be slightly different. But that is a good indicator that at least, initially you were a good healer, and you're still young.
Yeah.
So, look, I'm just here to tell you the truth, man. I don't want anybody to go out there and think that they are in a position of complete safety, that just because you had a great scar when you were, 3 years old or 5 years old, that is not necessarily going to equate to a man who's 30. It's just the way that it is. And same with all of these, and I think it was a really good question, like Joe said. Most people don't ask about different size strips because now we're in a atmosphere where just about every small case that's being done out there is being done by FUE. So you're asking good questions.
Well, great. That's all I had to share and ask, but I appreciate all the feedback.
All right, brother. I'm glad that you are no longer bitch tit Larry. Things are going to go well for you. I'm glad the medication is you kind of were able to titrate and you feel good on it now, and just fingers crossed.
Yeah.
All right, brother. Good luck. Thanks for the call.
Good luck.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
888-659-3727 is toll-free number, 888-659-3727. Sometimes I think I should just go out there and sell hair transplants like everybody else.
Why not?
You know?
Why not? You know, sell hair transplants like everyone else is. Charge for consultations like everyone else is.
Yeah.
You know, just hop on the wagon, man. Come on in. The water's warm.
Just, what I'm going to do is, and listen, you do a great job interviewing doctors, and I've had doctors on the show for years. In general, I'm not a fan of doing it because a lot of doctors who want to come into my studio, at least, they really just want promotion. There's a handful that are kind of really friends of the show. You got, Alan Bauman, Ken Anderson, a couple of other guys that are really friends of the show. They've been calling in for years, or every time they come into LA, they want to come by. But sometimes what happens, at least in my experience, is as soon as I have a doctor on, it's like, this is what we can do, and this is what we can sell, and this is like, yeah, you know what? You're doing good work. You're part of what I do. You're part of the IHRS, but I don't want to just talk about what's going on in your practice.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I think my members are a little bit like, wait a second.
I came all the way out here.
Well, besides that, it's like, wait a second. Wait a second. Why aren't you
people out of surgery?
Why aren't you pimping out hair transplants like other people?
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's the good news, docs. There are other people out there now that are putting a mic in front of their faces, and they're going to pimp you out.
You can be pimped.
You could be pimped. Pimp My Practice. That's actually the name of my show, my next show.
Like that. Pimp My Practice.
Pimp My Practice. Spencer Kobren's Pimp My Practice.
Pimp My Clinic. I like it. Pimp My Clinic it rolls a bit better off.
You know, I watch some of these guys and they're just like, they're asking the most inane, ridiculous questions. Like, what do you think about, I don't know, verteporfin?
FUE or FUT?
Yeah. What's the average age? What's too young for a hair transplant, doc? Like, come on. Jesus Christ.
When is it ideal to get a hair transplant? Winter or summer?
I mean, God almighty. How do consumers not see through this shit?
I'm not picking on anyone in particular. I don't know who's asked those questions before, but that's good stuff.
It's wild.
I like the
to
questions
me.
like from the last caller. I like the questions about strip size. Like, that's fun for me to talk about. And it's factual, and it's not, there is no pimping whatsoever. Like, I like getting that kind of. But
here's the thing: when there's a doctor in the room, and again, docs, IHRS members, take this in the spirit that's meant. I love having you guys in the program when the time is right. We've had some great interviews. We've done some really great shows. I've been doing this for almost 30 years. But when there's not a doctor in the room, and you're able to just fully, like the one thing I hate doing is contradicting doctors when they're on my show. And I really try not to do it.
Done it.
Yeah. I do it, but I try to do it. I try to be as kind as possible without sounding like I'm an asshole or a know-it-all.
You try to give them an out.
Yeah.
So they can kind of move around,
right.
Like I said.
But, there are cases where, maybe a physician has an opinion based on what he sees in his practice or she sees in her practice. But we have a much broader scope because we see so many patients from so many different practices. We're able to assess what's really going on in the industry, not just what's being presented at the meetings. Because trust me, except for the cases, the complication cases, what your colleagues are presenting you is A, the best they got, and B, not everything in their toolbox, sadly. These guys aren't sharing everything.
What's interesting is when you go to these conferences and you have doctors presenting, case studies. It's almost as if if you replaced everyone in the audience with patients or potential patients, the presentation wouldn't be any different.
No.
They're putting their best foot forward for their colleagues, just like they are for potential patients.
100%.
To put themselves, like I've been shocked at some presentations I've seen. It's all like I'm waiting for them to say, apply now for your surgical financing at the end, that kind of thing.
Listen, they want the podium time. They want the ability to say that they spoke at this conference. They want to be able to post something on social media now. They want to put into their CV that they were on the faculty of this, this, and this, which I understand. Mm-hmm. Running the Global Hair Loss Summit for 3 years taught me so much, man. Now, I saw things from the outside looking in, and I was like, this is really fucked up. Because everything was so different.
No idea.
During the hallway talks, during conversations in the hallway, than what was really being presented, at these conferences. Or a lot of doctors would applause at a presentation, and then behind their colleagues' back, to me, they would tell me what a piece of shit this guy is.
But you didn't hear that from me.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul Smith in the chat room, how's my mic now? He says that my mic is quiet, and I did notice my slider was not as high as it usually is. Check 1 2, check. How's my audio?
Your levels are all the way up on my side, but you can be a little higher.
Nice. Okay, Paul. Okay, sounds better, mate. Great, thank you, sir.
So first of all, what a pain in the balls. It's amazing what we pulled off, and it's amazing that, for 3 years in a row, we're the most attended conference ever in this field. Amazing. And what was great about the first conference, if I could pat myself and you and everyone involved on the back, was that no one could even imagine what we were able to pull off. Like the level of execution, it was beautiful. But what I learned about doing something live like that and having to depend on 60 or 70 physicians to get this content in and to get it done on time and have them actually somehow meet a deadline was that, I don't know how half these guys tie their shoes in the morning.
It was amazing to see behind the curtain.
I have never seen
100%.
So many people. I'm talking about a large percentage of people unable to follow the most basic instructions.
Yeah. Instructions that I actually made videos about how to do this, how to do that. And they still were getting it wrong.
But what's interesting to me is I've only worked, and I see work from everywhere, but I've only actually worked with, spoken with, dealt with the members of my organization, and I keep the organization small. So over the last 30 years, maybe a total of 80 people I've communicated with, worked with. I've seen how they've operated. I know what they can get done on time, whatever it is. There's only 2 who are members of my organization who are totally Mr. Magoo'd out as far as getting stuff done. But everybody else, solid. Everyone made their deadlines. Everyone understood how to make their content. But I got to tell you, man, everyone else, the Europeans, I've never seen anything like it. I don't know how they get shit done. I really don't. I can't even imagine how their offices are run. And I don't say this just to trash these physicians. I say this to say, A, the fact that we were able to pull this off, and B, we were talking about how people present, are trying to put their best foot forward. This was a conference for physicians only and staff members. It's also a conference for those who are not in hair, like people who are part of members of the American Academy of Dermatology and the Aesthetic Society and all the other organizations who are interested in hair and wanted to get involved in hair and learn. The number of promotional, calls to actions that Joe had to edit out from these people's talks they're supposed to be scholarly, PowerPoint presentations.
Yep.
I couldn't believe it. We had a laugh. It was frustrating, but we really had a laugh. So this is the industry that we're dealing with. I promise you, if we ran a urological conference, there'd be no 800 numbers on the bottom of their slides.
Yeah. I just think that's hilarious.
It wouldn't happen. There'd be
Dr.
no
Manish
like
Mittal
swoosh,
in the chat room.
Video toaster, dog and pony show before the slideshow.
Yeah, the intro, the advertising intro.
Yeah.
With the graphics flying around and everything.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And the guys from overseas, and I'm not even going to name the countries, I've never seen anything like it.
Speaking of overseas, we got Dr. Manish Mittal in the chat room. You're welcome to call in, Doc. Love to talk about this.
Let's give him the London number or the UK number.
Where is that? It's
Manny, I just put the number up on the
description.
screen. You're going to see in a second. It's 0203-3724-683. Call us. Let's talk about this crap. Manny Mittal is one of the few UK hair transplant surgeons, that I would ever bring on to the IHRS. That's just the way that is. The UK is a cesspool when it comes to, I think, cosmetic surgery and cosmetics in general. But hair transplant surgery, to find a decent hair transplant surgeon in the UK was almost impossible. There's maybe 5 at this point, I would say. And we're not talking about the big names, the guys that have been around forever. We're not talking about the people who are all these members of the BAHRS, which is like a trade organization, in my view. It has no teeth. Yet, it's an organization that tries to impart their, let's just say, point of view on
their worldview.
Their worldview on potential members or members of their organization. Like, maybe you probably don't want to do this and you probably don't want to do that because our members aren't going to be happy with that. Go fuck yourself. Who are you to tell a physician what they shouldn't do? Unless they're doing something that's, outside their scope of practice and it's illegal or that's damaging the industry or consumers. Oh, we have a call. I don't know who it is.
Good times.
Let's see who this is. Hey, you're on the air. Who's this and where are you calling from?
Hi, it's Dr. Manny from London.
Dr. Manny, how are you, brother? Long time.
How are you?
Long time. Yeah, not bad. I had some really good news. Family members, my younger sister got pregnant, so happy. It's really good.
Mazel tov. Congratulations. That's great.
Congratulations.
You very much.
It's nice.
Thank you.
Very good.
So, Dr. Mittal, am I wrong about what I'm saying and the way I'm expressing myself? Because I know that your colleagues really don't love the fact that I expressed what I believe is to be the truth.
Look, I think it's sad. I think the state of affairs are crazy. So I had 7 consultations today, and it's a dire state of affairs out there. It really is. And that's why I said most doctors don't actually know what they're talking about. And that pains me. It really does. They sort of put themselves out there as if they're some sort of an expert. And
which doctors are you talking about? Go ahead, name names, Doc. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Yeah,
Don't.
It's sad. It really is. But I don't know. We have this as doctors. We have a sense of responsibility for many patients. Okay, and a lot of people come to us and they ask us for our advice and they want to know what's going on. They just, even if it's just a case of saying, look, you are not a suitable candidate. I mean, in the last sort of 7 days, I've had 25 patients inquire, and they've asked me the simple question, hey, doc, do you think that I'm a suitable candidate for a hair transplant procedure? And the funny thing is most people actually know that they're not, but they're hoping for that glimmer of hope.
Of course.
And that's what's really sad about it. It really is. It makes me, it pains me.
But you know what comes to mind when you say that to me is that it seems like these patients are somehow finding our resources because in general, most patients are not going to ask whether or not they're suitable candidates. So I think that's good news.
You're absolutely right. Honestly, Spencer, you're absolutely right. The number of patients that have contacted me saying that, I've looked at the American Hairloss Association. That's how they found me. That truly is. I've watched Joe Tillman's videos. There's so many patients that come to me. I would say probably about 70 to 80% of patients that come and see me, they're very well versed in what
That's
a hair
great,
restoration
involves. I have to up your rates.
Thank you.
I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
Yeah, but that's the truth. That's the truth. You might have to, but I might have to countercharge you as well, though, because they genuinely value my opinion. And that's the beauty of it, right? They come to me and they ask me, look, doc,
I love hearing that.
I've seen 4 other clinics and they're all telling me that I'm a suitable candidate. What do you think? I'm saying, come and see me. Let me evaluate your donor. And it's a sad state of affairs because often, I would say 60% of the patients that are telling me that they've been told by other places that they're a suitable candidate. I'm talking about young guys, sub 25, not on any medication, with aggressive hair.
So they're being given the green light by UK clinics?
Not just UK clinics. This is a epidemic worldwide.
Sure,
right?
that I know.
It's not just UK clinics, and this is what pains me. Is doctors are giving the green light on patients that I think, personally, and this is just my opinion, are not suitable candidates for a hair transplant procedure. And there's a vast array of reasons as to why. Number one, your hair loss is not stable. This is the big thing. And I think
I'm going to interrupt you again. I'm sorry, but you said something interesting. You said, based on your opinion. You are a hair transplant surgeon. Also, as a hair transplant surgeon, this is a very entrepreneurial field as well. So why would you... you shouldn't even have to preface it by saying it's your opinion because why wouldn't you want to take their dollars if they would make good candidates?
Yeah. See, here's the thing, right? I think that there's taking dollar, but there's taking dollar in an ethical way, right?
Of course.
And I think that our industry is so polluted at this moment in time, so polluted, right? Everybody's looking for kudos. Everybody's looking for the next best thing. People are looking for merit where there isn't merit. There's novel treatments out there that people are piggybacking on and saying, "Hey, look, I'm the best thing since sliced bread." And I think that everything should be taken with a bit of caution. Everything in life in general should be taken with a bit of caution. And I think that a lot of doctors are trying to position themselves as the best.
Of course.
And
that's the way this industry has always been. And everybody is patenting their names for different procedures that are all the same procedures. And it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I think Joe's even talked about it. Sapphire Ice, Sapphire FUE Ice, Sapphire DHI, Cold Ice. I mean, people put all kinds of names on it, right? But the truth of the matter is there has not. And I've got a team that works for me for my PR, and they always ask me what is the newest treatment in the industry, and I keep saying nothing has really changed for 10 to 15 years. It's the same thing.
That's right.
But people
100%.
keep trying to put a new name on it because they're trying to look for that edge. They're trying to look for that thing that patients might get sucked into.
Look, I was just asked to do a podcast. It's a fairly big podcast, and I said I would do it. But they sent me this list of what this, and this is a physician who's a pretty well-known influencer, And the questions were just, they didn't give me a list of questions, but she told me or her marketing people told me what they wanted to talk about. And it was essentially, what's the latest and greatest? Let's talk about biohacks for hair loss. I had to write them back, and I just said, listen, you've seen my page. You've obviously contacted me for a reason. If you want to give the truth to your listeners, and she has a vast number of followers, then I'm willing to do that. But if you want to talk about bullshit, I'm not your person. Now, they got back to me and obviously like, look, whatever you want, that's great. So it's going to be good, hopefully. But that's the mentality of these marketing people. That's the mentality of these plastic surgeons and board-certified dermatologists who get big followings. They don't know shit. And even if they do know, they realize that what they know, if they tell the truth, they're not going to get the eyeballs. They're not going to get the likes and the followers.
Yeah,
and that's what
100%.
I've noticed in my practice. Like, I'm so cutthroat and almost blasé about it. And I like to tell patients how it is, right? I really do. I like to tell them that, look, this is realistic. This is what you can achieve. This is my methodology, and this is why I do what I do, the way that I do what I do. And take it as you will, right? But I'm not going to sell you a dream. In fact, in my practice, it's all about under promising and over delivering, because I think that's
like my love life.
Yeah. But the truth is, I think genuinely, if you under promise and over deliver, I think people perceive you to be far better than what you are. And that's my whole thing, right? I think if you tell patients that this is what I can achieve realistically, and you over deliver, then you're the best. You genuinely are the best thing since sliced bread.
And they love you. They absolutely love you.
And they love you. And patients genuinely, and you can speak to, and you have spoken to my patients, but if you speak to my patients, everybody out there spoke to my patients, they would understand why people come to me, right? It's because I tell them the realities of what a hair transplant entails. It's a stopgap. It's not a definitive end point. You need to take medication, and the realities are that you're going to go on to lose more hair, which means that if you have one procedure now, you'll probably need another one in about 3 to 5 years' time, regardless of whether you're on medication or not.
Manny, let me ask you this. So, you turn a lot of patients down. But what about the guys who walk through your doors, who've already been to Turkey, for instance, who, they may have felt satisfied for a year? I'm not even talking about the really bad, botch jobs, the guys that look botched after the first procedure. But once they start to progress, and they were told that maybe they need some work, but they were never told that really we depleted all of your donor and there's nothing more that can be done. You must have guys like this that walk through your door who think they could be topped up, so to speak. And you have to tell them, look, there's nothing I can do now.
Yeah, this is what I'm saying. It's a really sad state of affairs. Like, our industry is so messed up. It's so polluted. It's so dirty. People will do whatever it takes to take some money off of you. And it's so sad, right? And I say this, and I've said this in my videos, right? I keep talking about that as doctors, we've taken an oath. We've taken an oath to do no harm. But it's not like that. And it's sad. It really is. It really, really is. It's so sad to see doctors, sell themselves out time and time again to try and make an extra dollar.
I have to say, though, there's also, I used to think it was just, well, I need to be diplomatic when I say this. I think there's some cultural differences depending when you kind of go outside of the U.S. and the U.K. But the U.K. is pretty bad. It's always been bad. But there are some cultural differences where first do no harm really may not be a kind of a part of the culture of medicine, at least in aesthetics in certain parts of the world. And that is translated now to, physicians here in the U.S. and the U.K. feeling, I have to compete. And how am I going to compete with these guys who are willing to transplant these young patients? So at the very least, let me transplant this young guy. I won't screw him up right away. And maybe he'll have a couple of good years, of a transplant.
You know what? You're probably really 100%. You've hit the nail on the head. But in my practice, what I found is patients they're asking for advice, right? And I said this earlier. They almost know the answer themselves because they've done a hell of a lot of research. Like I said, most patients when they come and find me, they've already done research with yourself, Spencer. They've looked at the IHRS, they've looked at the American Hairloss Association, they've done a lot of research, and then they've gone on to look at Joe Tillman's, his podcast, his videos on YouTube. They've watched, they keep watching, and they learn, and it's like they're paraphrasing both you and Joe. And I asked them, I'm like, you're paraphrasing what I've already heard previously.
That's interesting.
So
Nice.
it's good to have so it's really good to have educated patients. But back to what you said originally about maybe Turkey not being the greatest place in the world. Look, let's be realistic. There's good and bad everywhere. Okay. Turkey has some very good doctors. Okay, you and I both know this. Turkey has some very good doctors.
Yeah, there's maybe 7 that I could think of.
Well, here's the thing. It's not about the number of doctors that are good. What is the important thing is that as a patient, you're going to narrow it down and you're going to look at those specific doctors, not the clinics,
right,
but the specific doctors that are going to perform the surgery on you. And that could be worldwide. That could be in America. That could be in Canada. That could be in the UK. That could be wherever, India, Australia, wherever it might be. You're going to narrow it down to the doctors that are going to perform the surgery. And then you have a conversation with the doctor that is going to perform the surgery. You have a conversation, and you look at the results that doctor is producing, and then you make an informed decision, right? Is this procedure the right thing for me to do at this moment in time based on the results that this doctor has produced time and time again? And it must be the doctor, right? And this is the fundamental thing that I think a lot of people sort of miss a beat on. The most important thing is who is going to be performing the procedure, who is going to be doing the essential parts of the procedure, right? Be that extraction, be that incisions, be that implantation, whatever it might be that strip surgery, whatever it might be, okay? And I think this is what patients really need to understand, number one. Number two is, are they truly a realistic candidate for a successful hair transplant procedure? There's a lot of doctors out there who are offering 3,500, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 grafts in a single session, be that over 2 days, 1 day, 3 days, whatever it might be. And I genuinely think it's just a case of what you've already said. It's about positioning yourself to be something that other people are not providing.
It's funny that I was going to ask you your thoughts on these really aggressive, larger cases. We're getting a lot of questions. I'm very candid about this. There was a doctor who's performing what they're called giga sessions, and we had him on as an associate member of the IHRS for a while, based on John Cole's recommendation. Super nice guy. This guy's a machine. I think that he has really good hands. He has a great skill set as far as the ability to move these grafts in a manner that maybe some other guys just can't do because he's young and he's strong and he's precise. But to me, all that means is this guy is an excellent mechanic. That's what it means. So, but when you think about the reality, the long-term reality, and what we're dealing with as far as the limitations of the theory of donor dominance, it really isn't a theory. We know that donor dominance is a reality. We also know that there's really only, not all donor hair, even the best donor hair, is 100% DHT resistant. So in time, that can miniaturize as well. So why wouldn't you want to use the best possible hair that's going to last the longest possible period of time in a person's life, and and really be appropriate, and utilize that hair in the best possible way? Give this guy a lifetime of a decent looking head of hair, as opposed to a big wow session. And even if every hair grows, we know that only about a third of that hair is going to last.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think you know what, you hit the nail on the head. I think, the gold standard is FUT surgery. It really is. Okay. And
That's interesting. That's interesting that you say that, and I appreciate that because you're a young guy, and that's unusual.
And, no, but it is. It's the gold standard. We all know this. Okay. We might not promote this in our practice because a lot of patients want the FUE procedure, but the gold standard is FUT. Of course it is. I mean, look, you and I both know this, and anybody who is listening to this broadcast right now, you better understand that FUT is the gold standard. Of course it is. It is, but it is the gold standard. And the reason for that is because the vast bulk of the grafts are going to be taken from your prime donor spot, okay? Right. And we call the donor zone a non-permanent. We call the donor zone a permanent zone. But this in itself is a misnomer. Yeah. And when I describe it as a misnomer, what I'm actually saying is over the lifetime, you can look at an 80-year-old man, and the typical horseshoe pattern of hair remaining in the back of the head is going to be considerably depleted. And you can see this. You might catch the wind blowing the back of the head. You might just look at the back of the head. It's going to be considerably thinner.
Look at our president.
Than what it might have been about, when they were 20 years old, for example. And that is very, very common because the donor, even though we describe it as a permanent zone, is really not a permanent zone. Over your lifetime, expect to lose 10 to 20% of those hairs specifically. And that's a very, very stark reality of it. And a lot of patients aren't informed of this, okay? But FUE is great. And FUE is great. Why? FUE is great because you can take and cherry pick specific hair follicles that suit your purposes for that specific procedure. Not only that, you do not get left with a long linear scar ear to ear, so it means that you can sport shorter haircuts. I'm talking about 0.5. Sure. And most people won't even notice that they've had a hair transplant procedure, especially if it's done conservatively. 2,500 grafts, even moving into 3,000 grafts, it's going to be absolutely fine. But anything beyond that, even at 0.5, you are going to notice scarring on the back of people's head. I mean, I had a patient, I speak very candidly, and I think this is the best way of people learning, right? I had a patient who had a procedure, 15 months ago. He could have had a great result. He could have had an absolutely phenomenal outcome. He'd been quoted 3,500, 4,000 grafts in application. I said to him, look, we're going to do 2,200 grafts. If I feel like I need to push it beyond that, then I will. And we did. We pushed it to 2,400 grafts in his single session. The poor chap banged his head getting out of a taxi on the way to the airport. Oh, okay. Shit. Yeah, it's sad. It really is. And he will be the first person to tell you this. And he develops an infection. Widespread infection across the entirety of the scalp. And the part of the head that he specifically banged, the left side of the head, it had about 30% growth. And this is my whole thing, right? If you're going to have a hair transplant surgery, leave yourself with a considerable parachute. Number one, things can go wrong, okay? Things can go wrong. It's a surgery. You could bang your head, you get trauma. For whatever reason, you may even develop an infection, okay? We never hope for that, but it could happen because it is a surgery. Number two, there is a high probability that you're going to go on to lose more hair. And the average consensus is that you've got about 7,000 grafts that can be taken from the back of the head before you start to make it look like you've got a depleted donor area, like a moth-eaten donor area. So that gives you an average number of grafts that you can successfully take without making it look like you've butchered that donor area.
And just to be clear, that is during the stage when most people are younger in life. where their donor is
Yeah.
not yet miniaturized, where they don't have aged alopecia. So in time, some people may have a little bit of more of a moth-eaten effect, but at the very least, a good percentage of the grafts that are going to be moved will eventually miniaturize. Now, that can give somebody 20 good years if it's done right.
Yeah, of course. But here's the beauty of medication, though, right? This is how I preface it. You've got to understand that it's also about medication.
100%.
So as long as you're taking finasteride, there is a higher probability that those, we can call it semi-permanent hair follicles that have been transplanted, they're going to last the test of time.
That's
and
right.
when I say test of time, I'm talking 20, 30 years, a quarter of a decade. That's the kind of time frame that you can expect. And this is why when I do my transplants, when I do my transplants, I take the nape hairs and I take the hairs just above the ears to use for the the follicles that I use in terms of at the front of the hairline. Because if you use these hair follicles, they tend to be a little softer. They tend to be more congruent with what a natural hairline should look like. But you and I both know in the long term, they're probably going to last about 20 years. And this is why it's important to have those singles just behind the nape hairs that you're putting right at the front, because the harder singles that are found in the middle of the donor area, they'll probably last a little bit longer, but they kind of look just a little bit thicker.
Well, if you're, and again, I've never performed surgery, so sometimes when I speak, when there's a doctor on the air, and I talk about what I know, I just want you to know. Listen, I know I'm not a doctor, but this is what I've seen, over 30 years. The reality is, if you are transplanting hairs directly in the sweet spot from the sweet spot of the occipital region, those hairs are going to be your densest, most, the strongest and the highest, caliber, hairs, the widest hairs in caliber.
Very wide. Very wide.
So what I'm seeing a lot coming out of these clinics overseas, and what I'm seeing a lot coming out of people's practices who are not very experienced, is they're putting these hairs, even if they think they're putting singles, they're putting these hairs in the hairline. Even if they're cutting the grafts to size, they're putting these hairs in the hairline. When, anyone who really knows what they're doing, nape hair is obviously great. Some people could deal with retrograde alopecia in the future, which is a possibility. But even the hair off to the sides on the donor usually is a thinner caliber than the center occipital region. So I think, utilizing, like what Jesus said, utilizing the side hairs and utilizing, for the appropriate patient, nape hair can work for sure. But the average doctor...
Switch the camera for me.
Yeah, the average doctor has... hold on, Joe, sorry. The average doctor has no idea, or the average clinic has no idea, that this is a really important nuance. And what I'm seeing is, besides doubles and triples in hairlines, I'm seeing these really thick, strong caliber, wide grafts being put, single hairs, and they look ridiculous, like exclamation points.
Yeah, absolutely. You've got it spot on. And this is the reality of it. This is the industry that we live in, right? People don't know what they're actually doing. They think that they're planting singles, and they think they're going to be soft singles, but they're not.
No.
Because they're taking it from the middle of the donor area. That's the reality of it. And when you take hairs from the middle of the donor area, yes, okay, they'll probably last a little bit longer. You're probably looking at half a century even.
Yeah.
The reality of it is that they're going to look more pluggy because they're going to be thicker in nature. Of course they are.
Yeah, but anyone who knows what they're doing is going to want to use that for the mid-anterior scalp to really build the background behind a softer hairline. And if the hairline does start to recede slightly again, that strong central portion of the scalp is going to be a great template to rebuild the hairline, if you need to in the future. No one gets that. So what happens is they build these really strong, dense hairlines with this thick hair, and then the balding process or the grafts that are placed behind it start to thin.
Yep.
So it's,
you've got it spot on, Spencer. You've got it absolutely spot on, and this is the industry that we live in. People want short-term results. They want the here and the now. Okay? And this is what I have to try and educate a lot of patients about. It's not about the here and the now. You know, a lot of patients come and see me even at 26, 25, 24. They're like, oh, I won't care what my hair looks like when I'm 50. I'm like, if you care now,
Yeah.
the reality is that you're going to care when you're 50.
Well,
The
I
reality is
tell
you're gonna
these
care
kids all the time. I'm 59 years old, and they freak out because and they're looking at me. I'm speaking to them. They don't realize that, if you really do the right thing, take medication early on. I don't care. Some of these kids make fun of my hair because I comb it to the sides, a quasi comb over. I'm almost 60, Doc.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, these kids, if they start too young, they can never look like this when they get to my age.
course.
They're going to have like tissue paper scarred heads.
You know, Spencer, the truth of the matter is the way that you style your hair, most people wouldn't even realize that you're losing hair in the first place. And this is what I try and tell patients. When people look at you, most of the time it's in a two-dimensional way. And this is how I consult patients as well. The most important area when we do a hair transplant is probably the frontal one-third, because you're going to see yourself in a two-dimensional way. You look at yourself in a mirror. The probability is that you're going to see yourself front on, maybe 45 degrees one side, 45 degrees at the other side. And even in pictures, that's how you're going to be perceived.
And no one's looking at my painted bald spot, and I'm fortunate enough to be fairly tall, so it's just, but what I find interesting is these young guys. I don't know if you saw my post about Jake Paul not being a candidate for hair transplant surgery.
He's not a candidate. You're spot on. He's not a candidate.
But the level of hate that I got, and also the personal hate, where these young guys are saying, well, you got a fucked up hairline. Look at, you have like a 5 head. And I'm thinking to myself, that hurts. No, I'm just kidding. I'm thinking to myself, these kids have no clue what a natural hairline looks like, especially for an older man.
Yeah, they don't. You see, Jake Paul is a prime example. This guy has got so much responsibility. He doesn't even understand.
No.
People look at him like a messiah.
Yeah.
They really do. They look at him like a messiah. Like, oh, he's the best thing since sliced bread, right? They look at him like a messiah, and they're going to follow whatever he does. If he goes to, Joe Blogs in Turkey, who's offering procedures at X price, hotels included, they're going to go there because, this guy has said it. So when he tells people that I've had a hair transplant from XYZ clinic, he has a massive sense of responsibility beyond what he can even imagine, because he's recommending in sort of quotation marks, he doesn't even realize that the responsibility is huge. But because he's recommending his clinic in a I don't know how to describe it, but in a quotation mark kind of way.
Oh yeah, listen. That guy. I think his name is Chris Bumstead. He's a Canadian bodybuilder, professional bodybuilder, young guy. You may have seen my post about him, or who's critiquing. It was actually your colleague, Ted Milne, critiquing his hairline. Ted got a lot of shit for that. And he did it, I think, in a very fair and kind way. He's really just trying to warn kids.
Ted is very kind. Ted is very kind, because that hairline is awful. Come on.
But
anybody
the hate that Ted got,
he was too kind.
People were calling Ted. How old is Ted? 35, 40? I don't know how old he is. He's
about mine.
37.
Yeah, he's a youngish guy. Yeah. And they're calling him bald, and look at your hairline. He's not a kid. He has a decent amount of hair on his head. And it looks 100% natural. So they were just destroying him because
that's sad.
Yeah,
that's sad.
It's insane.
This is the internet world, though. This is the internet world. I've had a lot of hate myself, right? And when you put yourself out there to preach the truth, right? You and I both know this. In fact, everybody who's ever preached the truth will know this. It's a sorry state of affairs, because people don't want to know what they don't already know. In fact, do you know what? People don't want to know what is real, because what is real is is almost a bitter pill to swallow. It really is, because it's like, hey, this guy might be saying the truth, but I want to live in La La Land. I want to live in La La Land and think that everything's going to be hunky-dory. When I'm 50,
I want to live in the Matrix.
You know what? Yeah, exactly. And I'll buzz it off. And I'll still be happy. But you won't.
No.
Because people are going to see the scars on the back of their head.
Yeah,
Of course they
first of all,
are.
you can never go
Yeah.
out in the sun. You know, you're going to basically, if you go out in the sun and, you know, you're going to have speckles all over, even if the scars are pretty
Not
well
even
hidden.
the Sunday, Spencer. You can be in a club, right?
Oh,
At
yeah.
the end of the night. You can be in the club at the end of the night. The light is going to be shining bright. You're going to see that someone's had something done. You're going to be like, wow, well, have you got alopecia on the back of your head?
Look,
What's
Doc,
going on here?
I know a guy here. He parks right next to me. One of his cars is a Bugatti. The guy is a legit billionaire. You may have heard me talk about this guy on the program. And if he's listening right now, because he recently voiced to me that he's concerned about what he did. But I see him park, you know, I just parked my car. I was like on the phone doing something. I see him pull up, gets out of his car. This was about a year ago. And I'm like, what the fuck did this guy do to himself?
Yeah.
And he had
And
just
you
gotten
get that a
back
lot.
from Turkey.
Dude, listen, it's not even Turkey. You know, we give Turkey a bad rep. Actually, Turkey's probably doing some good work.
Well, you know,
Comparatively,
in all
well.
fairness, I'm glad that you said that. I mean, listen, it's the vast majority of clinics are not doing great work, but there is
They're not.
a strong group of docs in Turkey that get a bad rap because of everything else that's going on in their country. And now it's happening in Brazil. It's happening in the UK. It's absolutely happening here in New York, in Los Angeles. But this guy could have afforded anything. He didn't go for a deal. He believed that this is that going to Turkey, that's the hair transplant capital of the universe, and they do the best work, period. And that's why he went.
Do you know what? I've seen this a lot in my sector as well. So I'm based in England, right? London, the capital of Europe, almost.
Yeah.
Okay, and we're not cheap. We're relatively expensive when it comes to price point across the world. Okay.
Yeah.
But what I'm finding is people from Norway, Denmark, all parts of Europe, they're coming to me, right? And a vast bulk of my work, it's actually reparative work.
Of course.
And it's because they've gone to other places where hairlines have been positioned too low. You know, the hairline has a high number of riddled triples. There's a bunch of reasons why, okay? And even density-wise, right? They're like, you know what, Doc, I'm not happy with the density I've got, you know, between the transition of my transplant, the hairline, and the hairline behind it. It just looks like there's a massive incongruity between the transplant hair and the native hair.
Absolutely.
And I get that.
Mm-hmm.
And I get that. In a short space of time, right? In 12 months, you're not going to lose that much hair because when you do a transplant, you're supposed to blend into the native hairs regardless.
Sure.
So for me, I think the burden of responsibility really lies on the surgeons that are offering the surgery. I think also that doctors need to take more accountability. And you know, this is a contentious point, and you may argue this, right? And it might be the case. But I think doctors need to be doing the extraction. I think, you know, when you're taking the grafts out yourself, that is you're the one that burdens the responsibility.
I want to let you know that I would never argue that point. I unfortunately have to.
A lot of people that do.
But I unfortunately have to work within the parameters of this fucked up industry. And
it's so you know, it's so effed up, right?
Yeah.
You and I both know this, okay? But I think that any time a surgical cut is being made in that, forget the fight nonsense, okay? Forget all of those politics. I genuinely
we did a long time ago.
I genuinely think that any time, and this is just my opinion, you know, everybody's entitled to their own, but any time a cut is being made into the skin, I think it should be performed by a surgeon. And I will go as far as saying that when grafts are being implanted, they should also be done by a doctor because this is viable tissue.
I can't argue with that. And, you know, what I find funny about the Fight the Fight campaign is the hair transplant industry was built on hiring and working with people who were essentially performing surgery outside the scope of their practice. To me, handling live organs, manipulating them, cutting them under microscopes, and then implanting them into a person's body, I don't see, at least in the United States, there is not a state in the union where that is within the scope of practice of a medical technician. Period. Doesn't exist. So their argument is ridiculous.
I didn't quite catch that. So let's rewind a second. Say that again?
So essentially, the industry was built on, with strip surgery, for instance. The industry is built on utilizing technicians to implant grafts and to cut grafts under microscopes.
Yeah.
Now that they started the Fight the Fight campaign a few years ago, their contention is that, it is against the law in some states for technicians to be involved as far as extracting, or I should say, dissecting grafts out of the back of people's scalps. Not just extracting, but dissecting it. But the problem is their message or their point was made on the fact that that surgical aspect of the surgery is not within the scope of practice legally of a medical technician. But neither is implanting grafts. So your point to me is well taken, meaning that even implanting grafts is it's a major part of the surgery. You are handling live organs. The amount of damage that could be done, the crush damage, and just someone has a bad day and you have two technicians on either side of your head, and if they're not working in complete, unity and
absolutely.
It's like a symphony that has to be really well orchestrated for the transplant to work well.
You're spot on. You really are. Here's the thing, right? A lot of people think that when they're for a hair transplant surgery, they're just getting a cut. They're getting a cut, they're getting a barber cut or whatever. It's not that, My patient coordinator often describes it as, patients can go into a chippy, like a local fish and chip shop in England.
Yeah.
And it's not like that. The reality of it is very simple. I think, you are handling live tissue. And I've spoken to a huge number of colleagues of mine. And I say to my colleagues, right, you say that doctors should be the only people making cuts into the scalp, right? But then by definition, we should also be dissecting the tissue. If we're going to do FUT surgery, we should also be dissecting the tissue under a microscope, right? Then we should also be separating the grafts into singles, doubles, and triples.
Correct.
Then we should also be implanting every single graft, okay? So where is the endpoint? Where is the cutoff when it comes to what a doctor should do and what a medical assistant or a surgical assistant should be doing? Because
I agree with you. I agree with your point. And again, there's the problem that we have and the industry has. This is the way the industry has been built. So it's either, these hypocrites who feel that they were losing their leverage and losing their market share because of, these.
Well, that's what it is, though. That's what it is. That's exactly what it is. You've got it spot on.
So now they're talking about doctors, only doctors doing surgery, but they're not giving consumers the reality that, we only want doctors to do this part of the surgery.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that is a very valid point. I think reality is the older generation, let's put it that way. Yeah. They want to corner the market in a certain, they're worried about their longevity, as it were. Yeah. And this is what I've always said to all of my patients.
They're putting their kids they're still putting their kids through college.
Yeah,
or paying for the third divorce.
Yeah.
We've all got bills to pay at the end of the day. I've got a young child myself. But the reality of it is, if you're gonna hold the ethos, then it should be this, right? Okay, as a doctor, I should extract. As a doctor, I should do the incisions. As a doctor, I should do the implantation as well then, right? You're handling live tissue. So do it all, right? Don't cry about it. Do it all, okay? Yeah. And that puts you in a non-political state at that point, right? And that's what I do in a lot of my practice. I implant a vast majority of the grafts, and I think that's important. Because implantation of the graft and the incision that you've made as a doctor, knowing how deep you've gone, knowing at the angle that you've gone, who better to place those grafts?
Manny, do you know how many people, how many of your colleagues can't implant grafts? So I would say that in their practices, the patients are better off.
They wouldn't know what to do.
The patients are better off with skilled technicians than the doctor.
Yeah, of course.
In their hands.
And I've heard these stories in the industry as well, right? Listen, you've got to understand that in my sector, we speak to a vast array of people, and often the pool is very limited. And I've heard stories, okay, some of the quote unquote, the best doctors in the world, they've had technicians come in, they've seen them extract, and they're like, Doc, hang on a second. Like, they might have whispered a sentence or two in their ear and said, Doc, you need to stop. Let me do the extraction. And then the tech does the extraction and everything goes hunky-dory, right? That's the reality, because some technicians are truly gifted.
Oh, there's some really skilled techs out there.
There really are, and I've been in that industry as well, so I know the industry.
Yeah,
and I've seen some truly gifted extractors. I've seen it all. I've seen techs extract. I've done the extraction myself. I've seen incisions. I've seen implantation. I've seen it all. I've seen DH. I've done it all. I've seen it all. I've been there. I've done it. Right. You know this better than most, because you've seen my patients, you've talked to my patients, right? The reality of it is this, and it's pure and simple. I think the buck stops with the doctor. And if the doctor is inadequate at extracting, be that FU or FUT, if the doctor cannot do incisions, and if the doctor can't do implantation, then I'm sorry, they are subpar. They really are.
Well, it would be wonderful for a guy like you to give a talk at the at your trade shows, like at the ISHRS or FUE Europe, all the the WFI and all the other happy horseshit trade shows, and just speak the truth.
What you just said? You just said happy horseshit.
Yeah,
it is happy horseshit. It is happy horseshit because it's all political. Come on, you and I both know this. We're going to talk candid right now.
Yeah.
It is all happy horseshit. It really is. And I know, we've spent a long time on the phone right now. But the reality of it is that most doctors cannot do every single step of the process. And you've said this before, and I will say this once again to reiterate the point. Let's say your technician is having a bad day. Let's say they're having a bad day. They're not able to do the implantation the way that you would expect them to be able to do. You need to find a way to say, you know what? Yeah, darling, or mate, listen, just jump off the head. Let me do this, okay? Right? In a diplomatic way, in a politically sound way that doesn't frighten the patient. And then you sit there and you implant that side of the head or the other side of the head, whatever it might be, for the entirety of the procedure.
Look, if you get into a car with someone who's drunk, you're going to tell them to pull over and drive that car.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, I mean, and you know what's funny, and I was kind of using that as an analogy, but the truth is, I call it the hangover factor. These patients have no clue. You have these traveling techs, that even in some of the better clinics in your country and, here in the U.S., and they go from clinic to clinic. They have, these doctors schedule surgeries, and they fly in late at night, or even if they fly in the afternoon, they're like, let's go to the bar and have a couple of drinks.
You've said it.
These people, it's a hangover factor. These people go in early in the morning and they're slightly impaired.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. And you said this time and time again, and I agree with it. I really do. I think it's a sad state of affairs. I really do. I think as doctors, we've got to hold ourselves up. We've got to keep ourselves accountable to bettering the industry, and sadly, as you've already rightly pointed out, that most people are just in it for the bottom line, the dollar.
We can talk to a blue in the face. It's important that consumers hear this and they understand the reality of what's going on. But here is the reality of your colleagues and the field. In the end, it doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter what Joe does. People want leads. That's it. People want to find now they want to be associated with us because it's they're strong third party credentials, and I would say most of the doctors agree with my stance that surgery is a last resort, but they also don't mind being involved with I would say people that may not have the same take on things as we do, and they're more of they're salesmen. So everyone needs leads, everyone needs business. I totally get that. But with that said, if the truth is told all the time, they feel, a lot of the doctors, your colleagues feel, they won't get as many leads. They won't get as many people through the door.
No, and I can understand that. I can understand why people would think that, hey, why would I align myself with Spencer Kobren or Joe Tillman, who they go on about, talking about medication first, non-surgical treatments first, and then considering surgery as a last resort. But that's how practice should be.
But besides how it should be, in the end, it's better for your practice. You're getting patients that are actually going to be good candidates. They're going to be prepared for everything that they're getting involved in. You're going to deal with a lot less shit online. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's what yields good outcomes. It really is. That's what yields. And this is a short-sightedness of the entire industry. That is what yields good outcomes, a good plan, not just for now, but for 20 years in the future. That is what yields good outcomes. Yeah. And this is where people are so short-sighted. You have got it so spot on. The pair of you.
Well, here's the good news.
That's exactly the problem. It's short-sightedness. They can't see the forest for the trees, and they don't understand the concept of putting barriers in front of patients to make sure that they are the best patients that they could possibly hope for.
Absolutely. Yeah. I completely agree.
I know it's late where you are, Dr. Mittal. Guys, if you want to contact this incredibly insightful and honest physician, and it's hard to find. You could find.
No, it's the truth. It's the truth. That's all I want. That's my information. It's about being honest.
Right? I've seen you try to tell the truth online, Manny. I've seen your Instagram, and I noticed that. Like, I look at your content, I'm like, this content should be, getting, 20,000 views and 30,000 views.
You and I both know it. It's crazy.
And it doesn't because you're not talking about top 10 or top 3 solutions to your hair loss, rosemary oil and whatever. You're telling the truth.
Rosemary oil.
All right, Doc. You guys want to find Dr. Mittal? You can go to ihrs.org. You can obviously contact him there. He may turn you down for surgery, though.
These guys are great. Nah, these guys are great.
All right, Manny, listen.
Thank you. Honestly, I think you guys are the two most ethical people in the entire industry. If it wasn't for you two, if it wouldn't be about the message that you guys spread, I would not have joined the organizations, right? And that's the reality. And I say the same thing about Spencer. Mate, listen, you growed me. You growed me hard. You growed me like there's no tomorrow. Okay, and then same thing with Joe. It took almost 2 years for Joe to say, "Do you know what, Manny? I think you're ready for this." And this is the reality of it. People think that it's just a simple milestone.
Yeah.
Exactly. You put whatever money in and you'll get whatever out. It's not about that. If that was the case, you would allow everyone in. Come on.
Oh, besides that, I would start a Turkish clinic website. You know how many, and Indian. You know how many applications we get? I show Joe once in a while, and he's just like, Jesus.
Yeah, it's crazy, mate. Honestly, I get a lot of emails myself. A lot of emails say to me, "Hey, Manny, will you refer patients to us?
Yeah,
we're going to be about £1,200 a surgery. Anyone who says they can't afford you, send them our way."
Isn't that amazing? What a
it's crazy.
And we'll give you a cut.
Industry. Yeah.
Crazy.
Wow.
Literally crazy.
Well, listen,
lad. Well, pleasure.
It was a real pleasure. It was a great call.
Thanks for fighting a good fight.
Yeah, I'm so glad you called in, and we'll talk. You and I should do an Instagram Live at some point and see how that goes.
We should. We all should. It's a pleasure.
All right, brother. You take care.
Outstanding.
Take care.
Take care,
Bye-bye.
Doc.
See you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Dr. Manny Mittal. Am I mispronouncing Manny's name? Mittal. Yeah.
Manny Mittal.
I'm an idiot. Because I'm dumb.
Pretty sure. No, you're not.
A little bit.
Good call, though. Good call.
We started late. I don't know if you want to take one last call.
Let's take one last call.
All right. Hey, caller, you're on the air. Who's this and where are you calling from?
Hey, Spencer. This is Borgi. I'm calling from Bremen.
What's your last name? Wally? First name?
Borgi is my name.
Borgi.
I'm calling.
Borgi.
Yeah, exactly. I'm calling from North Germany.
Oh, welcome.
And
I don't know why I asked for your last name. I meant your name. Sorry, Borgi. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine. I hope the quality is good because I'm just on my mobile phone right now.
It's not bad. I mean, it sounds like you're on the Autobahn, but whatever,
Yeah, there's streets out here. Yeah. Actually, I just went out for clubbing and just turning home.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's quite late in Germany, like 2:30.
Wow. So what can we do for
you? And Yeah, I had few things I wanted to discuss.
Sure.
The first thing was really, I think something that is not so much discussed. I am a former hair transplant patient, and how much it also affected my dating life, so to speak. And it's funny because I'm 35 years old, and I had 2 years ago surgery at Hattingen Hair at Dr. Merceneau.
That's great.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's really awesome. And I really also have to thank you two guys, like Joe and Spencer, because if it wouldn't be for you, I would be butchered somewhere in Turkey by a very cheap clinic, because that's where everyone goes here in Germany. That's the standard. Everywhere in my gym, I see it. Everyone.
I think you should tell Sever that, by the way. Anyway, no, I appreciate that, brother, and I'm so glad. I'm so glad that you found us and you found your way to a really good clinic.
Yeah, and this is important because I really want to. I want you to continue this, because you're doing this for so long time, and for last half year I heard a lot of your episodes, and the world is very big, man. Yeah? There's 1 billion people in India, 1 billion people in Europe, in China, and maybe there is some guy, I don't know, near Shanghai, you never heard of him, and because he speaks English, he finds your content, and you help him, that he makes a good decision in his life. And you never heard of this guy, you never heard of me, but you really, really helped me, because I would now have a complete depleted donor by now. 5,000 FUE grafts, what everyone gets. I don't know where they get this number from, but everyone gets 5,000 grafts. And
Well, I'm so that keeps me wanting to do what we do, even though it's very frustrating. It's like sometimes I'm talking to Joe. I'm like, we're just out there. All these gangsters are, getting a tremendous amount of play online. All these guys, you have these physicians who are essentially just catering to the low-hanging fruit. They're talking about celebrity hair transplants and talking about people's plastic surgery, and they end up getting a million followers. And they're, in my view, they're not really helping anybody.
You are helping tremendous amount of people, and people here, if I tell them I had a hair transplant, they don't believe it, because for them having multi-grafts in the hairline, that is the standard.
Yeah,
they don't believe it. What's going on? And especially for me, and I have a second FUT now in November, and after the second FUT, I have around 7K grafts out of the sweet spot, so to speak. And I have Norwood 5 to Norwood 6 diffuse thinner, so to speak. But I have very thick, coarse hair, which is good to cover, because I have
Well, I think it's important. You hear it from a young guy who, again, you are in a part of the world where most of your contemporaries are now going to Turkey for these large FUE sessions. You found the right clinic, who ended up performing strip surgery on you, which obviously that's what they believed you were a candidate for. And
100%.
Now you have so much hair to work with.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to know the important part. You're going to talk about how it affected your dating life. So that what's the story with how it affected you?
Well, usually it goes when I date a woman or see a woman, they usually go okay, you look younger. What has happened? Even my sisters in my family, they said you look younger. And for my dating life, it really gave me back the framing of my face, and that really made me as handsome as I was before I lost my hair.
That's
because
great.
I turned from, let's say, handsome to normal-looking guy, and I really learned, okay, no, I'm not ugly or disfigured if I'm bald, obviously, but I really have to work I have to approach women, which when I was 25 or something with more hair, they were more approaching me, and I didn't have to do so much work. And now I get those old times back. Yeah, I feel it, and I'm more perceived as handsome by women, which wasn't the case before.
That's amazing. That's got to be a great feeling, and you are welcome, brother.
I love hearing that.
We're getting this guy laid too, which is great.
Right on.
Yeah.
Like, what better
really
outcome could there be, right?
Yeah.
That's what it's about. Good for you, man.
Yeah.
Good for you. Happy to hear that.
Yeah.
And how long ago was your first that first surgery? Did you say 5 years?
The first surgery was when I was 33, so it was 2 years ago.
Oh, okay, so 2 years ago.
And
yeah.
And I have most of it now in my hairline and mid scalp a little bit and crown a very little bit. And I want to make a second surgery now from back to front, so I don't have to make a slick back anymore. So I have more.
Yeah.
Now I think that's important because you're a guy who had a good procedure. You're thrilled with the outcome, and you still need more hair. So many guys now, your contemporaries, who are going to places for 5, 6, 7,000 grafts at a time, usually about 5, FUE. Most of them will never have the chance of having a reasonable second procedure without looking like they have shotgun marks on the back of their head.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, Spencer, I really studied this thing and this whole industry for years through German forums. I watched all of the videos from Joe Tillman, etc. And if you have that deep knowledge, compared to your colleagues and friends, they still won't listen to you. They don't want to go into depth and into the technical details. They just, I saw this on Instagram. Well, they have a lot of views. This influencer went there. So why not? So I go there. And I don't have much influence on it.
Here's what we're seeing now. We're seeing it with women who have unfortunately filled their face with these, these synthetic dermal fillers. What they don't realize is, and what they're starting to talk about is, and I started talking about this 15 years ago when I had the opportunity to get into the mainstream cosmetic surgery world, and I chose not to because I just thought it was even dirtier than the hair world. So these women who are getting this stuff injected into their face, they were told that essentially these injectables, these fillers, this material will, disappear from their body, eventually evaporate. Go out your lymphatic system, and you just need to keep topping it up. What they're finding out now, it's finally coming out, is this stuff is permanent. It just migrates. And now you see all these women who are really, they're becoming disfigured. They're aging themselves more rapidly. And we're seeing all these cases, right? It's coming out. What I'm seeing now, just in the last 5 years of Instagram and all these this influence out there for these big hair transplant procedures, these guys they're not talking about it online, but they are basically disfigured after 3 years, after 5 years. They may have enjoyed 1 year or 2 years of a decent hair transplant, or what they thought was decent. But I would say in 5 years' time, we're going to have so many walking wounded from the aesthetics industry, all over the world, that people aren't going to know what to do with themselves. There's going to be a lot of suicides, in my view. These people will not be it's irreparable damage. They can't be repaired. And your friends, people your age, people that speak to us, that even call this show, they don't want to hear it. They don't believe it's going to happen to them. But that's actually the norm. 7 out of 10 hair transplant patients in today's market range from being dissatisfied to completely disfigured.
Yeah, or maybe there need to be some kind of regulation. I mean, I kind of can understand it, that not everyone who wants to do a hair transplant surgery wants to spend years and years of studying it and reading so much internet forums. They probably need better consultants, like Joe is one, right? We also have one in Germany.
Why?
His name is Andreas Kramer. But
I know Andreas.
He's a great guy. I think he's very much on your line, so to speak. And but like most of the consultants, they are just like they want to sell a machine to you or like a car, you know, and just push it very hard. One very weird argument that I heard from a very cheap consultant was, we have beautiful technicians. They're easy on the eyes.
That's unbelievable.
Like, that was basically an argument for my friend who went into consulting. And I was like, really?
It's unbelievable.
That's the level.
We have the best looking staff.
Yeah,
Well,
that will never go out with you, but you can come look at them.
I think eventually people will catch on. There's going to be so many people who are going to end up disfigured. You're going to see so many people walking around with moth-eaten donors. Once the hair starts to miniaturize, that was moved, they're just going to have, thinning wisps of hair with moth-eating donor areas. You're going to see so many of these people in Germany, and, I'm seeing them more and more here in the U.S. So
Germany is near to Turkey. No? We have a lot of Turkish people, so going there for vacation and transplant is very.
The marketing is out of control for the German market. Like it's a huge part of what makes Turkey so much of a destination. Back several years ago, there were several German YouTubers that were making a big deal out of going to Turkey. This is early on, where YouTube influencers were working with the clinics to get referrals, and they weren't disclosing it. They weren't telling the audience. By the way, mention you saw me, and that way they get a payment on the back end. They weren't talking about. They weren't disclosing this, and they're responsible for a lot of the growth of the Turkish market over the past 10 years. Because they've been pushing this so hard. There's a lot of that going on in Germany.
And they don't understand that they don't have a natural result. No, there's this guy, I forgot his name. You have him in one of your videos who got this, I say, monkey-like hairline or what? Like Manchichi-like hairline.
Yeah.
Probably know who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they don't understand that.
I don't remember.
They don't have.
I don't remember his name. I just remember the first thing that I recognized, or the first thing that caught my attention about him, was the hair that he had going in. He already had like crazy good hair, but I also noticed he was staying at a hotel that I stayed in at one point. And I was like, I know this place. And I started watching. And it's like, oh my God, I can't believe he's actually having his hairline lowered, and he had no hair loss.
Yeah, I think.
And then he went back. And then he went back multiple times.
Dude, I have these young guys who write when I provide them with the truth, and this kid's not a candidate, or I did the Jake Paul video. They're telling me, they're looking at me saying, well, you're going bald. You need a hair transplant. Yeah. All right. I'm 59 years old. My hairline is not what it used to be, but damn,
Crazy.
This is, I'm ecstatic that I could live my life like this. They talk about Joe's hairline like it's somehow unnatural. Joe's got the most natural looking hairline out there, at least in the hair transplant world.
Thank you.
Like, I was also arguing in another hair transplant, I don't know if I can name it, like the other forums, networks, and I was mentioning you, Spencer, and they were like, this guy's wearing a wig. He is not even in this industry. And I'm like, what?
Yeah, well, you know what? And here's the thing. Say I was wearing a wig. Say that's a true. Say that was a true statement. Take it all off the table. What about the information that we provide? What about us telling the truth about the reality? Now, unfortunately, I have to paint my bald spot. It's pretty well painted today, actually. It's not bad. I'll show you.
Maybe it was a cheap wig. You have to paint something.
Wow.
Yeah, and these are just, not nice people. That's just the way that it is, What are you going to do?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Exactly. And a funny thing is also, like, if you're very much into detail into it, you sometimes lose sight what is like relevant for the normal person. Like I even now I met two girls, and I was just talking openly to them that I had a hair transplant because it was on my mind for some reason. And usually women react very positive on it. They said, "Oh wow, this is possible. Oh, it looks good, cool." But this one, like, she was a little bit disgusted, so to speak. And I even showed her a picture of the FUT strip that was taken out on my smartphone. so, and she was like, ugh. And I was like, okay, maybe that was a little bit too much.
too much information.
Yeah, maybe not on the first. Yeah, maybe not on the first date.
Well, listen,
Exactly.
brother, I appreciate the call. I'm so glad that you've done well.
Yeah, it was a great
And
call. Thank you so much.
It's great.
Can I have-
And do me a
can I have
favor,
one-
tell that guy,
Yeah.
the guy that made the wig comment, to go fuck himself. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, it's on YouTube. Can I have one
I
technical
think
question?
I had one last
actually?
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, one last question. I want to do a perming. Like I have like very thick hair now, and it's a little bit curly because it's from the back of the head, and I want to curl it even more by doing a perm. And I asked Dr. Mercenou, and he's like, yeah, I think he wasn't a fan of it. I think he's a very conservative guy. And I just wanted to have your opinion about it, because I am afraid not so much of the chemicals. I mean, maybe it's bad for the hair, but not for the hair follicle. I'm more afraid of the attraction that it puts, because if you do a perming at the barber, it puts a huge traction. And I see on the right side of my widow's peak, before that transplant, I was more bald, because that was the part where I was combing my hair from right to the left, so I was more bald on the right spot from the traction that I created. I styled my hair with hairspray, and then I was combing it. And so I think maybe the traction will be not so good for the hair, especially the remaining hair. What do you think of perming?
I wouldn't do it. I mean, a lot of
Really?
doctors say it's fine, and you're not going to really affect the grafts. But I mean, if you're happy with the way your hair looks right now, why fuck with it?
Maybe because you get more volume after perming. It's a style that is now modern. Having curly hair, kind of, for young guys.
It could be. Yeah.
Well, the way I look at it, first off, you got to understand the right side temple. If you look at someone, even if they haven't lost hair, usually the right side temple will have more recession than the left side. And it's not because of brushing or combing or anything like that. That's just a natural pattern of progression. But the idea of perming, I personally have no problem with it, because it's such a temporary thing. Like, you go through the chemical process, you go through the setting where your hair is going through this process of being permed. But once it's all done and everything's washed out and all that, everything relaxes and you're fine. The only challenge that I can see with that is once you have a perm, say like in the donor region, when you do go for a surgery, it does make things a bit more difficult to look at. But if you're shaving that area down for the surgery, then that's a non-issue. Like, I used to color my hair. Like, after I had my third surgery.
Yeah.
I was doing highlights. I was doing like blonde tips, and like I did that several times. Didn't hurt a thing.
Okay, Joe.
Perming,
but
I don't think would, as long as you don't do it, all the time for many years, I don't think it'll cause any problems.
But what about the traction force? Because that will be for some time, and my fear is that since I have maybe a third or a fifth of the original density, the force by the traction is 4 to 5 times higher. Do you know what I mean? Because you have less hair where the force is put on. You know what I mean?
Well, what are you talking about traction? You talking about during the process of applying the perm?
Yes, because they will curl your hair in some kind of thing, and then they will pull your hair quite strongly. And that on thinner hair will result in more force
hair loss. Hair loss from traction is over a long, sustained period of time of many months. And just a one-day situation where your hair is being pulled, that's not going to cause traction alopecia. You might have some hairs that come out, but they'll turn around and come right back out. But it won't be anything that'll be noticeable. Like that's just not the way that works. Traction or hair loss from traction has to be through sustained traction over a long period of time. That's how it works.
Okay. So it's probably more when I combed from the right to the side daily, and the hair was styled a lot with hairspray. Maybe that was a different situation because I did it every day, or no?
Yeah, I mean that's a different subject, but I mean, brushing your hair typically doesn't do anything like that. It's people that have their hair in braids, very tight braids for months at a time.
Yeah.
Those people experience traction alopecia. Women that wear very tight ponytails every day as a normal hairstyle, they can experience traction alopecia, traction hair loss.
Yeah, like if
Brushing your hair?
if I take off my wig, I got traction all over the sides. So
Exactly.
all right, brother. Listen, I'm so glad that you made the right decision. You found us. Thank you for the kind words. It's very much appreciated. There's so many assholes out there.
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah.
All right.
Thank you, and please continue this. Don't stop.
Well, we'll do our best. I appreciate you, man. Take care.
Only if you promise to call back.
I will call back. Yes, because
Okay.
you changed the time. Nah, you changed the time. You know.
Yes.
Now it's easier for Europeans to call you. Thank you.
Okay. Well,
all right, brother.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Have a good rest
Take
of your
care.
night. Take care.
Thanks.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
All right, guys, let's call a night. Wig Boy and Five Headed. We got to get out of here.
It is time to leave. Time to wrap up. Jesus.
Fucking Pete. These animals online are unbelievable, man.
You're starting to sweat under your wig.
It's coming out. It's crazy.
All right.
Guys who are holding on, sorry, we're going to go. It's already late our time. Want to thank everybody for tuning in. It was a fun show. Dr. Mittal, thank you so much for calling in. It was a really, I think, a powerful and enlightening phone call. A lot of docs just don't have the courage to speak the truth the way that you do. So I really appreciate you, brother. Follow me on Instagram, at Spencer Kobren. Follow Joe at whatever his Instagram is. He can tell you.
Joe Tillman Official.
At Joe Tillman Official. Until next time, guys, be strong. God bless. And thank you so much for listening. Have a good night.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry for any inconvenience you may have been put to prior to the programme, and I'm glad you enjoyed it. And if you could now leave by the exits at the rear, that'd be splendid. Thank you.